Hey guys, so today we're going to look at now changing rectangular equations into polar equations, and then we'll change polar equations into rectangular equations. So to convert rectangular equations to polar equations, we are going to remember that x is going to be equal to r cosine of theta, and then y is going to be equal to r sine of theta. So that's what we need to remember here, most importantly. So a polar equation needs to be in the form that has an r and a theta in it. So you shouldn't have any more x and y values in there. Okay? All right, so let's look here. So if I had x equals a -3. All right, well, x is the same thing as r cosine of theta. So I'd have r cosine of theta is going to be equal to a -3. Well, most of the time then we want to solve for r here. So if I solve for r, I'm going to divide by cosine of theta. So this is going to be r is going to be equal to -3 divided by cosine of theta. Or you could also say cosine is this 1 over cosine is the same thing as secant, right? So this could also be -3 secant of theta. Either way is fine. Okay, so what about this one? So we can use both of those pieces of information. So x is going to be the same thing as r cosine of theta plus r sine of theta. Okay, we want to solve for r, so we can factor out cosine of theta plus a sine of theta. And then I'll divide both sides by this cosine of theta plus sine of theta. So this is going to be 5 over cosine of theta plus sine of theta. Good deal. All right, what about this one? Y equals x squared. So y is going to be r sine of theta. X squared would be r cosine of theta, all of that squared. Okay, so we'll have r sine of theta is going to be equal to r squared cosine squared theta. Divide both sides by r right here, so we'll get an r out. So this will be sine of theta is equal to, you'll have an r left right there, I'm sorry, r cosine squared theta, and then solve for r. So isolate your r, so you'll have sine theta over a cosine squared, which is sine over cosine is a tangent, right? So you could rewrite it a few different ways. So about this one, x squared plus y squared is equal to a 16. So x is going to be r cosine theta, all of that squared. Then y will be r sine theta, all of that squared, and then I'll have a 16 here. So this is going to be r squared cosine squared plus r squared sine squared. Yep. So I could factor out an r squared, and I would have a cosine squared theta plus a sine squared theta. Well, cosine squared plus sine squared is a 1, so this will just be an r squared is going to be equal to a 16. Take the square root of both sides, so I'll have r is going to be equal to a 4. Not too bad. All right, what about this one? Okay, I can do the same thing, or let's go ahead and simplify this a little bit. So this, if I multiply this out, this will be x squared minus a 2x plus a 1 plus our y squared is equal to a 1. The 1's will go away. X squared plus a y squared. Oh, and I should have done that on the last one. I wasn't even thinking. X squared plus a y squared is a r squared. So that would just be an r squared there. And then I'll have r squared minus a 2x here. So r squared is going to be equal to a 2x. And x is what? X is the same thing as r cosine of theta. Divide both sides by r. So you'll get r is going to be equal to 2 cosine of theta. All right. Let's do one more. Rectangular to polar. So I've got x squared is equal to y squared plus a 1. So x squared would be r cosine theta, all of that squared. Y is r sine of theta, all of that squared. So this will turn into r squared cosine squared, r squared sine squared. If I move that over here, I'll have r squared cosine squared theta minus r squared sine squared theta. Factor out the r squared, and I'll have cosine squared theta minus a sine squared theta. Well, that's not 1 anymore, but that is, remember, that is the double angle identity for cosine. So this will be r squared cosine of 2 theta. It's going to be equal to your 1 here. So if I did divide, I would have an r squared is going to be equal to 1 over cosine of the double angle here. And that is a good enough answer for me. Okay. All right. So now what if we go from polar to rectangular? Okay. So we can have x is going to be equal to r cosine theta, right? So if we have polar equations, we can go into using that to go into rectangular. So y is going to be r sine of theta. And then r squared is going to be x squared plus y squared. And then tangent of theta is going to be y over x. Okay. So that's what we're going to use. So if I had r equals 5, okay, so r equals 5, so right here I could use this one. Also, right, if I took the square root of both sides, I would have that. So, or if I squared both sides here, but I'm going to go kind of the long way about it. So if I had square root of x squared plus a y squared, I would then square both sides, and you would have x squared plus a y squared is going to be equal to 25. Okay, what about this one? This one's theta is going to be equal to 2 pi over 3. Well, I know that tangent of theta is y over x. So if I took the tangent of both sides, so I'll have tangent of theta, tangent of 2 pi over 3. Then tangent of theta can turn into y over x. And tangent of 2 pi over 3 will be a negative square root of a 3. Solve for y here, so this will be y equals a negative square root of a 3x. Okay, so here I've got r equals 2 sine of theta. So what if I multiplied both sides by r? Because r sine of theta is just going to be a y. So if I just multiply both sides by r, then that would give me an r squared. And this will be 2r sine of theta. And r sine of theta is just going to be a y. So that'll be a 2y. R squared is going to be x squared plus a y squared. So then I'll have to complete the square here. So to complete the square, I'll move the 2y to the other side. So I'm going to have an x squared plus a y squared minus a 2y is equal to 0. So remember how to complete the square. You will take half of b, so half of 2 is 1, and square it. And you'll add it to both sides here. So this will be x squared, and then this y squared minus 2y plus a 1 is going to be factored to y minus a 1, all of that squared. So there we go. Okay, I'll do this one. So multiply both sides by r, so this will turn into r squared is equal to a negative 6r cosine theta. R squared is x squared plus a y squared. R cosine theta is ax. So I need to move this x over here to combine it. So x squared plus a 6x. I'll leave a little room right there because I want to complete the square. And when I move it over, I have a 0 here. So I want to complete the square here, so I'm going to take half of b, so half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is a 9, so I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So I'm going to factor this, so this will be x plus a 3, all of that squared, plus a y squared is going to be equal to a 9. So there we go. Okay, so that's changing your polar equations into rectangular equations so that we can find our points. Okay, all right, if you have any questions, let me know. Y'all have a good day.